to. All right, so there'll be a few more that will be coming back to join us, but in the meantime, we'll get started. I'd like to welcome our remote presenters coming in from our West Coast feed today, from San Luis Obispo, California, which is a lovely place. I actually did a job talk down there before I came and I was actually in San Luis Obispo, California when the Dean of Memorial was doing his cross-country tour at academic institutions recruiting. And I called my wife that night after I talked to the real estate agent about housing prices in the area. And my wife said, "Oh, the Dean from Memorial was here." And I was like, "How much are the houses?" So as much as I love the weather and the situation, it was like, that was back, probably 13 years ago. It was just after the business school had gotten, I think, $10 million from the founder of Kinko's, that they were splitting it up into $500,000 interest-free loans for new faculty to get started into a house in the area, because housing was such a challenge. So I'm a little bit familiar with the area, and so I'm really glad that you're able to join. Just to sort of provide people with a bit of background on this, is we did a session, our last training session, which is going to be uploaded shortly, which talked a lot about the different tools that were available to provide video feedback and audio feedback to students, as opposed to just simply the written comments that we're doing that students may not be taking advantage of. I was at presenting at a conference, was New Orleans, Martin?
That's correct.
Yeah, I was presenting at a conference down in New Orleans, and Martin came up and was good enough to sort of share some of the work that they had done at CalPoly with regards to the project, and they had some really solid research and results as opposed to anecdotal or, well, here's what I did in my class type thing. And so I really wanted to bring them in today to take advantage of the experience that they've got, and to share with you a little bit about their findings and what they found and how their successes were. So I did provide you with a copy of the bio of both Martin and Luanne, and you've got that in front of you. So I will turn the floor over, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, it's good to be here. First of all, I appreciate the introduction and talking about the home values. So it's good to see that while we might have elevated home values, we seem to have the same values in academic standards. So I'm going to use it as the hook to talk about the opportunity, and much appreciated, Lyle. I know when we have faculty get-togethers, it can kind of stretch for a while, so we certainly appreciate the time while we are just getting started here on the West Coast. You guys probably had a long day already, so we are trying to make sure that it's interesting and useful. So as we're going into it, I'm going to transition. As you can see, we try to cater towards Memorial University, so we just really try to make it cater to the audience that we have. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our background, and you have some information on who we are, so we don't need to be redundant. As I pull up who we are and basically how we got here, Luanne is going to share with you guys kind of the background on the specific conceptualization, because we're going to walk you through, as a kind of quick glance, we're going to walk you through the adaptation, adoption, and diffusion, which is a typical framework for a business approach. But Luanne is going to give you immediately a background on how we even got started and how this is a decade in the making. I'm going to go and preface it by saying Apple just had this big release on the iPhone 7, and we initially started our research talking about podcasting before the first iPhone was even being released. That kind of might give you an understanding on how long Luanne and I have worked together, so I'll have her kind of take it from there.
Geez, I feel ancient. I'm Luanne.
Experience.
And Martin and I are currently working on publishing 6 articles with the Online Learning Consortium in their new Center for Research. And you can look at those when they get up and find out all the long details about how we did this. But the short reason that we did this had to do with Martin and I have known each other for about 15 years. And about 10 years ago, we did, like he said, some research on how podcasting would affect teaching. And then we both got busy with our lives and saw each other occasionally, but didn't do another project together until in January 2015, I read an article that sparked my interest in the Chronicle Higher Ed. it was titled "Could Video Kill the Red Pin?" It was by Steve Kulowich, and I started reading that and thinking, since I do a lot with faculty on screencasting, I thought, wow, this could really change things. I was a music professor and I hated red pins. I'd try everything, purple, green, whatever. But I also hated grading that way because as a music professor, there was a lot of things I wanted to say to students that I was not going to spend the time to write out on a piece of paper. So I felt like assessment just became circling wrong notes in their compositions and not really giving them the kind of feedback I would have if they were in my office. So anyway, I contacted Martin, asked him if he was interested in this project, and he said, certainly, it's time for you and I to do something again. So we're really happy to be doing this. We've been working a year at CalPoly, almost a year and a half, really, on our plan of diffusing this to faculty. And last year, we spent the whole year gathering data and training them and just finding out feedback from them about how it was going. So we're really excited about this project, and I'm going to let Martin go back and tell you a little bit about more about how this began.
You bet. And again, I think having a colleague like Luanne, it makes it extremely amazing to work on something like this. And I don't want to diminish it, because while Luanne at the Institute is an instructional designer, she really is a chameleon that can flip between being an instructional designer and a fellow faculty member. And we've basically identified in this process that we really do bring out the best in one another, because there are times where I'm the technology person and she becomes the faculty, and vice versa, which makes us just sort of a match made in heaven. And without exaggerating it, it just seems like this was the perfect time for the perfect project, because at CalPoly, we were struggling at the time with faculty feeling not appreciated. We were also struggling in the CSU system with funding, trying to build greater classes, and I think that's a universal educational challenge. And probably the traditionalist, I'm looking at early adopters versus late adopters, that were basically really holding on to the traditional format. And I really appreciated when Mehl was doing his presentation, because while he was really sharing some of the things that you guys were doing, he also gave us a really big plug, because I was able to say that we were working on a pedagogical project with a little bit of an endorsement that came only because of the research from the technology, which was the screencast-o-matic technology. And since I was able to share it in Mehl's presentation, we went from having perhaps a mediocre turnout to really having close to 100 participants come, and I should insert here, potentially get a free copy of Screencast-O-Matic, but nonetheless they came. And I really did appreciate Lyle today giving us this opportunity, and at the time, kind of giving us that plug. So here's where we're going into trying to convince our faculty why this is really way overdue to go down this route. And what we wanted to share with you, because I think this might actually be a good time to insert this, is we created a portal, and we really believe in a portal format that when we go and share with our faculty a project, that we really do a good amount of internal management of communication. So we created for faculty to guide them through this process, this intra-network. And as you can tell, I'm pulling up the portal here itself, and we're using a Moodle adaptation at CalPoly. What we've provided them with is an overview. This is phase 2, so this is winter of 2016. So in the fall, we had our initial batch of 10 faculty, and we had a retention rate of 100%. So every single faculty that adapted this methodology not only went and did it on an entire annual cycle, they actually signed on as faculty mentors to the next batch. So we used this sort of domino effect paying forward, and I'm just pulling up here the type of faculty that you saw coming on board, and you might be able to tell right away they're running a gamut of different educational representation. We have 6 colleges at the Institute. They ran the entire gamut of various members of various faculty. Go ahead, Luanne.
I might mention these weren't the only faculty involved. These were the first faculty mentors that we chose who mentored the future faculty. Yeah,
that's a very good point. We actually had developed a methodology in how we identify what we called mentorship, or what the term is that we basically phrased was mentorship, competent mentorship agents. And as we have identified them, we actually have also identified a methodology on how to actually go and proceed with finding those faculty on your own campuses. And so as I walk through here, obviously since it was a research study, we provided the consent forms, the surveys that we had them conduct, which was the metadata that we collected, the quantitative and the qualitative, both from students and faculty, both pre and both post. Over the duration of the entire study, we had roughly in the mid 1,500, I think it was 1,390 students directly being impacted and 20 faculty directly being impacted, which makes up roughly 10% of our cumulative student body with this research, which we felt was quite representative. And also guiding them with best practices and sample work, which I was being permitted to have authorized by my students to be shared. And then that leads us all the way to, again, why Luanne, as being more than just simply a faculty member, being instructional designer, was really truly nailing down also the tutorial aspect, which I don't know if you want to share some aspects that we're having up on the screen, Luanne, right here.
I wanted to say from an instructional designer point of view, this was really so easy because of the tool Screencast-O-Matic. It's so intuitive for faculty to learn. So it was very easy to train them just having them watch videos that I created. We didn't use the Screencast-O-Matic videos that they prepare, even though those are really good, because what we really focused on was the pedagogy. We had them watch some of those, but we didn't care about editing because we wanted this to be a quick run through of their assessment of their students. And Martin provided an excellent sample for them to see how that would be done on a video assessment. Like he said, he got permission from the student. And most of our faculty reported that that was really helpful for them, that they were unfamiliar pedagogically how to do this properly, and they understood the software, but they really needed some hand holding on that part, and that was a large part of what the portal was about, even though they had 1 2-hour session with us face to face.
But I think Luanne also diminishes how good of a video person she is, because to give you an understanding on the buzz that we generated, I had office hours, and I will talk to you guys about office hours in a moment, that I probably sometimes had up to 40 or 50 students that were coming to my office in the course of a 4-hour window. And some of them were traditionally asking about, I can't read what you're writing, so could you just quickly clarify this, which was basically redundant office hours. Students just wanting to read what I already wrote to them, and I was getting exhausted and I was getting frustrated. And in the duration of this research project, we reduced effectively, this is a testimonial, but across the board, office hours and the redundancy clarification from students coming and asking for what the notes meant or what the feedback meant or what the faculty had already spent an hour trying to relay to the students by 70 to 80%, which means that instead of having a 4-hour window with me trying to deal with, that sounds harsher than I meant, working with 40 students, I reduced it to having 5 students there and not to actually clarify notes I've already worked on. And my office mate, who actually had seen this progress, was so, I guess, for what it's worth, impressed by this impact that he also had signed up and had discovered the exact same component. He's our assistant forensics director, and with the time that he actually was able to get out of not having this redundant work, he, by quote, stated that they went from a mediocre debate team to being a top 10 international debate team competitor because he was able to do more mentorship with his students. And so while I have the slide up here that demonstrates sort of the workflow going from the traditional, everything gets inputted into having an electronic flow that is really not an electronic flow. Students might, and none of them really do it longhand anymore, generate a paper, print it out, or longhand write it, and then give it to the faculty who annotates it. Then he or she provides that as the only feedback to the student, which is still 80 to 85% of the way the workflow is in most common university settings. We're looking at truly finally having an impact, and instead of it being a finished product, it becomes being part of the process. And so when you're looking at the flow, the student actually provides a true digital workflow, and the faculty can actually provide this feedback to the student. And this is where we want to go and transition to the matrix, where it makes a really huge difference from the traditional grading feedback to the digital feedback. And if you're looking at the time, space, cost, clarity, scope, and quality category, one of the things that I think as a business school you probably appreciate, and I know it's not only business faculty, is that we are for the first time really finding that when you're looking at the cliche, you can have something that is quick, something that is therefore fast, something that is cheap, and something that is good. You can have all three with this project. You can only have all three. You do it better than the traditional way. If you're looking at the oral feedback, faculty were initially apprehensive because they felt that this is not scalable. This doesn't actually work in large classes. This doesn't work in environments where it's more effort. Well, we had a faculty that had 100 plus students, and he said he cut down what would be an average of 4.5 hours of grading per day to roughly, am I accurate, Luanne, about 50% of that same time with his classes.
And I'm sorry. And our English faculty, who are always hesitant to do anything with technology, were dumbfounded by the amount of time they saved grading essays. Some of them said by 50% their time grading. And, you know, for people that have to grade all those freshman compositions, they just wanted to kiss our feet, really, at that point.
Just one thing just to share as well is beyond the work that has been being done at CalPoly. I was at another conference last year where there was another piece of work that was being presented from a business professor that had multiple assignment submissions, so it was sort of a multi-part assignment over the semester, and they tracked across, I think, 6 or 7 professors, and they found the identical numbers that Martin and them were talking about, that the amount of time that they spent creating the feedback was about half what they would spend if they were actually typing or writing the feedback for the students. So it saves time for the instructor, because it's a lot easier. You don't have to worry about checking your grammar on your feedback where you're slamming the students on their grammar. You know, you can just sort of talk. You got to be careful of that. But more importantly, they had one section of the classes that had standard feedback, and when they took a look at the percentage of the comments that were provided in the initial feedback that were incorporated in follow-on submissions, the number was 4 to 10 times greater for the video feedback than for the written feedback. So what was happening is the students weren't taking the time to read all the written content, but they were taking the time to listen or watch the video feedback. So if you were doing multiple part submissions over the semester, by the time they got to the end of the semester, the quality overall was significantly greater because they were actually listening to what you were saying. And so it was a time saver for the instructor. It was an advantage for the students in being able to incorporate and be able to implement that. And that is something that we see across many implementations of providing a video feedback format. So, you know, it's not just that, you know, their particular format that they did with an English prof at CalPoly. There's other documented research papers that are out that are showing very similar type results, which is one of the big reasons why I wanted to sort of share this with you.
Well, no, this is a perfect transition, because we had talked about how we wanted to talk about the evolution from the DCGP, the digital grading project, really to that next stage, which is the pedagogical concept of the mentorship aspect. And it's almost as if you could have not given us a better hook. So as we're looking at sort of the 10-minute window that, if I understand correctly, we kind of have been allotted, one of the things that we had basically identified is that this is way more than just simply a time saver or an efficiency component, because that's where really Luanne and I were kicking into the mentorship aspect, the element on the quality, the clarity. And that's why I was pulling up, this is probably the last slide related to where we were in April, the less is more, where you're looking at, you know, really the convenience and the competence being for the first time a merged environment. Convenience here is actually the equivalent of more competence and more quality. And if you're looking at, you know, if you're looking at what you just covered, Lyle, in the clarity column, where you're looking at stressful for students, high anxiety for faculty, we really have precision, guidance, accountability, and we actually did also a focus group where we were investigating students' feedback, and students were initially saying that they didn't know how to actually digest this feedback, and actually for the first time were telling us, well, I didn't really know if this is something I wanted. Sort of like the Apple approach of, create something and students might not know that they want it or need it. And we discovered that students were only a little apprehensive until they discovered that this is mentoring and consultation and accountability. And the quote from one of the students was, I can tell when I have a faculty that doesn't care and dials it in, and I can suddenly tell when the faculty is actually really caring, because I want to do a better job when I can see it transparently. And that is completely absent in the traditional method. One of the things with that, and so I really appreciate you putting that in perspective, Lyle, because that gives us sort of a jumping off trampoline here for why we got to the next stage, because what we extracted, and this is what I had shared with you at the conference, is we got tangibles on what the time dimensions were, if it's a corrective assignment or a comprehensive assignment, or a clarification what the ideal timelines would be and what the ideal framework were. But if you don't mind, I am going to then fast forward, since you're going to have this also available to your team. We're going to make this accessible. This is where we translate it to the next stage, and that's when Luanne had prefaced it at the beginning on saying we have this 6-part series that we're going to talk about the digital academic revolution and really inserting mentorship competency. And this is where we're looking at it impacting primary, secondary, higher education, and professional development in a knowledge transfer repository methodology. And this is quite possibly the most significant slide we wanted to share with you guys, and we would be happy as to get to the Q&A part to elaborate a little bit if we do have the time. And I think this is probably the part that Luanne and I are both the most excited about, and look at also longevity and collaboration in the future, because you're looking at the 3 columns, and they can technically be scaffolding on top of one another. Not on top of that, not only that, but we can look at how this feedback goes beyond simply being an audio recording. It becomes the most significant impact in the traditional educational environment, flooding over to professional training that we've never had. So instead of actually speculating what might Mozart have thought, or instead of speculating what might my faculty have identified, going all the way back to the traditional feedback, we have an ability to capture the learning process, not the learning product. And this is unprecedented, because when Luanne and I were initially looking at podcasting, we had students saying, I don't want to hear your voice when I'm jogging on the beach. It's not the right time and not the right place. Brick and mortar for education, pleasure and enjoyment for when I need it. And we now have a totally different infrastructure between the technology truly infiltrating classrooms and the entire gamut of our student body. And this includes traditional and non-traditional learners. So what we have here in this slide, and I think I'm going to try to dial in my enthusiasm, because this is huge. This isn't just a big deal. This can potentially rupture, and I have been saying to colleagues, the way we're looking at it is what Khan Academy did for tutoring in the mastery learning is what asynchronous screencasting can do for this entire spectrum of education, from primary to secondary to tertiary, inclusionary of professional training, and inclusionary of special education adaptive learning across the curriculum. Win-win for the student body, win-win for faculty, win-win for the extended community, and win-win for administration, which we believe is not only unprecedented, but as we're talking with you guys today, is something that needs to happen, because it's the right time and the right place. So I'm going to dial down the pitch, and we're going to emphasize what we're looking at here. Because at CalPoly, we were looking at the potential, if you're looking at the first column for primary and secondary education, that this is really a way that on the wave of the Common Core in the United States, and in particular in California, we can actually make faculty capable of being Common Core compliant and able to be satisfied when doing so, and engaging the parents in that process of having accountability. And I think you might see the thematic of accountability and mentorship across the curriculum here. And then as we're talking with you guys today, this is really where we're looking at higher ed and professional training, and this is exactly consistent, if I'm not mistaken here, Lyle, and what you just shared with us on why this is a big deal and not just another technological adaptation. Looking at it is reflective learning, which is the buzzword in industry. It permits modeling instead of just simply feedback that is discouraging. We try to emphasize all the positives. And then the best practices, and if I correctly remember, Lila, you had shared that you had faculty that were senior faculty or about to potentially retire, and you guys were considering videotaping their feedback as a sort of best practices and a way to capture really the quality of your institute. Am I correct in remembering you sharing that at the conference in New Orleans?
That is correct. That's one of the things that we're doing. And just one comment about the modeling part. I have found myself, when I go back and take a look at some of the written comments that I put on the paper, particularly if it's sort of like the end batch of the paper where you're like, okay, how can you be such a friggin' idiot? You know, that the tone becomes sort of hard to, harsh when I go back and re-evaluate it. But when you're providing video feedback, I find that, I can say that they're an idiot, but I can smile and laugh while I'm saying it. It sort of takes the edge off it a little bit. I don't actually say the students are an idiot, but it sort of, it allows the harshness and the frustrations that I find personally when I start to put things in a written evaluation. I start to get frustrated more and more sometimes, and I have to go back and reevaluate and detune what I say. And I'm finding I'm not needing to do that with the video because I'm really trying to help identify where their issues are and really try to provide the guidance. And the facial gestures and appearances are a big thing, to sort of relay, as Martin mentioned earlier, that the prof does actually give a crap, that they're not just dialing it in. And that facial connection is a big piece of it. So, we do appreciate.
Well, and great testimonial, because we want to make sure that we insert very briefly here that nothing is perfect. And so one of the first things that I remembered when saying to Luanne, and I'm pretty sure that we have about a 3-minute window, so I don't want to go over here. Okay, perfect. Well, I had said to Luanne, like, oh, you know what? We might be wrong. I'm getting an oil change for my car, and I can't grade crap. I can't grade. I'm so used to waiting for an airplane. I'm grading. And Luanne's like, well, gee, what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, well, you know what? What I discovered is when I schlepped these papers I have twin boys to a sporting event, and I have this classic, and this is where you're looking at the community aspect on, oh, I'm grading, and what a chore, and how annoying. I don't really, I go through the motions. And this accountability on, you need to have a quiet environment. You need to go and actually have a little bit more of a pain in thinking things through. We discovered this feedback from several faculty that that's the traditional change. Just like an ebook where you go, this is not something I've done, and this is not something I'm initially comfortable with. And from an early adopter stage, it's where you have people that are basically saying, I don't think this is so good. And I should insert here that one of the people that we were really proud to recruit is an educational veteran. And she was working in the Detroit school system for so long that she became basically sort of an icon among that environment, who is at CalPoly. And I think her statement about being tech savvy would be, me and technology are the least of friends. To her, this particular project, because of the simplicity of use, she outright stated is the coolest thing that has ever happened in her academic career. She can't believe she hasn't done it until now. And she instructed graduate students in her environment that she was actually mentoring, and she loved everything about it. So if we could have had the person that's the least tech savvy and on the furthest spectrum of early adopters to basically the laggards, we were thinking of her as being one of the individuals, because of her expertise in education, as being able to just shut us down. And so between discovering that we need to be accountable, being more focused, and even having an individual that is anti-tech basically becoming an evangelist, makes us not only feel like we're onto something, we're on the breakthrough of truly, well, for what it's worth, revolutionizing digital academia, because it is a time that the infrastructure is in place, and what we need to change is the meta mindset of the pedagogues that are educating, because it is clearly an opportunity for us to make an impact. And so when we looked at this last slide here, and you're looking at the collection, the repository, the archiving, and if we're looking at long-term, Luanne and I are extremely excited from a pedagogical perspective. As a comms instructor, exactly everything that Lyle was just laying out, that's my field of expertise. And Luanne actually speaks the universal language of music in conjunction with being a tech expert. we can't wait to drive this really to the next force. And if it becomes something that we can work, with your institute and actually really also push it beyond the boundaries of the US, we're excited. I mean, we can't wait. And I think if you got to learn a little bit about who I am today, when I get excited, I am jazzed, and I want everybody to be jazzed about it. And I get to capture that on screen because you get to see it now. You would get this from the white papers. You would read it and go, another thing I have to go through. I think you got that. We are thrilled. And that's obviously why we didn't just send you 6 PDFs. That's why you get to be here today. And we're extremely appreciative of this opportunity.
All right, thank you. Questions, anybody?
Or comments.
Remarks, dirty jokes, anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for your great presentation. I see real value. It really helped me deal with a challenge that I'm always trying to do better by, is the increasing number of international students in our business classes. And I think by having face-to-face voice, our intonation, our concern for their learning, they can watch it over and over again and really get the nuances of our assessment of their learning and really provide them hope to do better, because it's such a huge challenge for many of our students being from different continents here in rainy Newfoundland, away from family and friends in a totally different learning culture. So thank you, and I'm really going to look at trying to provide, I'm not going to commit a lot, but I will commit to one piece of video evaluation to my students. So thank you.
And guess what? You don't have to say it again. Which my mother was always teach that I'd never be a good teacher if I didn't learn to repeat myself. I hate to repeat myself.
Yeah, and I mean, just to sort of emphasize on that, we're actually going to be shooting a video with Dr. Diane Ford, who we had talked about, recording your classes and how I've been recording my classes and uploading them for the students for years. Diane did that last semester with her classes and uploaded them, and she was getting unsolicited feedback from the international students saying, thank you so much, because they may not be translating in their mind the same pace that we're going through, but if they can go back and re-watch segments of the class to re-pick up those theories and those concepts, it's a big advantage. And so it translates into the feedback as well. And so we're actually going to be, showcasing some of the results from Diane's incorporation of that technology. And it's one of those things that, just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean that there's not a more effective way. And we need to continually, not everything's going to work. You're going to try something and go, oh shit, not doing that again. But then there's going to be other things that you have those aha moments, and it may not be perfect, but you tweak it, you learn from it, you go on. It's like one of the slides that Martin shared was talking about the optimum length of time for the feedback part. That's a big piece, because if you start rambling on too much, you really get to see where the drop-offs are.
We tried to keep our faculty at a minimum, at the maximum of 5 minutes, because nobody has the bandwidth to handle longer things.
I think as well, Lyle has made a good point that brought another point that you emphasized, was it doesn't always have to be more complicated. We keep going to the more complex and the platform and robust and all this, which I'm all into as well. But sometimes common sense has to kick in once in a while, and you've kicked my common sense again today.
And that's the advantage of the tool that they used at CalPoly. Screencast-O-Matic is low cost, super simple. You can't break the damn thing. And the important part that I think needs to come across from some of the other research that I've seen in this area is it's not about being polished. And in fact, some of the highest feedback that some people have gotten was when they were, had their laptop propped up at their dining room table and they were talking and their dog jumped up behind them in the middle of the feedback. The students loved it because they realized that the prof was a real person. you know? And so it's like, it doesn't have to be these super polished edits
Totally
and
agree.
super slick transitions. Just the, hey, this is me and this is what I thought and here's what you need to do, you know, gets your point across as a human to human. It's basically almost like you're sitting them down in the office like Martin had and saying, okay, here's what I thought about your paper, and then next student, and doing that with every student in your class, but in a much more time efficient
Could we
manner.
be sent that rubric? Ron?
Yep.
I'd love to have that.
Yeah, are you going to share the
Rubric
slide deck
select.
with us, Martin?
Yeah, we're definitely sharing when Luanne was saying, you know, we're basically, you guys are getting a sneak peek of the series, so really your time will not be more perfect. And one of the things that, if you don't mind me also inserting here, one of the things that's really stressful to faculty, possibly even, you know, faculty that are not veteran faculty, and I don't want to diminish, you know, that it's only veteran faculty that can handle it, but when you have a student coming up to you after a lecture, where you're not in the mindset of sometimes even clarifying an assignment, you're put on the spot. When you have a student come to office hours, you don't know who shows up. And in each of those instances, it actually elevates the stress, the frustration, and the ability for a faculty to be on point. We actually created a DVR for faculty to be able to allow students when they are good and ready. So they're not intimidated by the faculty. They're not feeling that the faculty is actually somewhat overstepping their bounds, or that they're just nodding because they want to accommodate the faculty. This is actually permitting, which is why we were considering the office hour environment. This completely changes the dynamic of an office hour, because the student isn't there only to regurgitate the same information the second time around. This can now be refinement, clarification, mentorship, guidance, all this stuff that I dig about being in a teaching institute, because we're not at an R1, we're at a Cal State, and that by definition is a teaching institute. And so this permits students to really genuinely get the best of all worlds. As researchers, we can actually get our students to get the quality when we're ready, because that means that my feedback is also me contemplating what I want to say and get it right. And I can always, and that's what we had faculty saying, well, what if I say something and the student is going to hold me accountable? Well, they do that during office hours. They do that after class. The only thing is that if you're really great faculty, this is now also going to be something that you can showcase when you're up for tenure review. This is something that actually puts a tangible on an intangible. And the faculty that, quite frankly, don't want to be that innovative probably are not the faculty that care that much about being a good faculty. So I have no problem with those that don't want to, because they probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I get the idea. Martin has no tolerance for laziness.
I don't. I'm German by all qualities of working hard and making sure our students get the absolute best out of us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very, very much, both of you, for taking the time to share with us today.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
And hopefully you have the great rest of the day in Southern California.
It's Friday.
Central California, I guess. Is it raining?
It's not raining.
Oh, we could use rain.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have yourselves a great day. Take
Thank
care.
you, Lyle. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.